Well, joining me now is the founding director of the Wits Center for Diversity Studies, Professor Melissa Steyn. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. What's your takeaway from how the department has dealt with this particular investigation, and also the point that is made by the MEC there in terms of the time frames, that unfortunately sometimes it is limited, but there's of course money that is spent on this, and there's a serious issue that needs to be unearthed, and sometimes they're unable to do that, and that's the point that's being stressed in this finding as well.
Yes. Well, look, I think that there, as you're saying, this is a serious issue. There are important facts that need to be unearthed and thoroughly scrutinized and pondered upon. And so, you know, they have to take whatever time they need. I don't think that one can rush this. So yes, I think that, you know, they're needing to work with a great deal of caution, because it's also very sensitive. So I think that one might be a bit impatient with the fact that that it takes long, but it has to be done carefully.
Yeah, and also again, considering that this is not the first time that there have been these allegations coming out of the school. It's not the first time that a law firm had been appointed to do investigations, and now it's being done again. Is there a different approach to how we can deal with investigations of this nature? Because, well, it is Pretoria Girls High School that is in the news. It is not limited to only Pretoria Girls High. Maybe there are other schools that are dealing with a similar situation. So do we or should we take a commission approach that is able to deal with all of these issues from different perspectives and different stakeholders that are not just limited to a single school?
Well, you know, Eldrin, that's a very important point, because I think it's really necessary that we don't exceptionalize Pretoria Girls High. You know, this has been a flashpoint. It's where we've been alerted to these issues that are happening, but it absolutely will not be the case that this is just a single isolated, you know, site on which these kinds of things are happening in our school system. So as you are saying, I mean, there is a great deal of merit to the suggestion that we should go the route of a commission and do a thorough investigation into the school system more broadly.
Yeah, and what would the impact of something like that be? And the remedial action, sorry, not the remedial action, but the terms of reference, because as we're pointing out that we shouldn't just limit it to Pretoria Girls High, but at the end of the day, these are girls that would be leaving the schooling system and then become part of the formal workforce in our country, and in that workforce as well, it is very diverse.
Well, that's absolutely true. You know, you mentioned remedial, and I know you aren't going there yet, but I think that in addressing this, one also needs to have like a whole school approach. You know, the difficulty with this is, as we saw, you know, the governing board is involved. And parents also become implicated indirectly through the ways in which they encourage. And I believe, you know, some girls were removed from the school. Their parents took them out of the school on the previous occasion that there were these incidents. So one really needs to try and understand the community, the school community, as a whole system. And if one is going to be thinking in terms of how do you address this, you've got to try and work with all the different moving parts of the system. So that's quite tricky, but I think it is quite important. Not, as I say, not to try and treat this as if it's an island.
Yeah, with that said, the point that is made in the report as well is how the chairperson of the SGB tried to derail the investigation. So the powers of the school governing body, how far those powers go, but also the ability of the school then to say that, yes, the SGB has made its own findings, but is there anything that we can put forward to say that actually we are dealing with a systemic issue?
That the school could say?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you know, I mean, they seem, from what I can gather, Eldrin, they seem to have done a lot more along the lines of sort of like papering over cracks and just ignoring. I mean, that seems to have been the way they've handled a lot of the things, is just to sort of like hope it'll go away. But when you are treating these kinds of matters, in that, you know, sort of like benign neglect sort of way, it actually is a form of collusion with the racism. It actually is a tacit agreement for it to continue. So I think with the school, there's a lot of criticism that we can make of the way in which they did handle this. It was clearly very unsatisfactory.
Yeah, I know that you use the word ignoring, but I'm also trying to think now, Professor Steyn, from a socialization perspective, and how an individual, in this particular case, for instance, the school principal, who is white, who perhaps maybe from how she has been socialized in her understanding of what racism is, then dismisses the point because for her it doesn't meet that threshold.
And Aldrin, you really are touching on a really important point, but a really important point, which is that people work with these different understandings of what racism is, and quite frankly don't know what racism is. And because they have an idea that it has to be some sort of really egregious, intentional act that, you know, is characterized by foul language and things like that, and they're just assuming that is the only way in which racism manifests. They're not particularly equipped to deal with these issues that are more systemic. I saw that the girls complained that things are not overt, you know. So this is a much more, it requires a much more subtle understanding of racism, a much more thoroughgoing understanding of racism that also understands racism in its systemic manifestations, as opposed to just simple, you know, acts of violence. And it's quite clear that of course, we haven't read the reports on why the this governing board exempted the girls at one point, sort of like...
Well, they said there was no... it was due to a lack of evidence, solid evidence. That's the description.
A lack of solid evidence, okay, all right, yeah. Well, that's interesting because the lawyers have found evidence. You know, so again, you know, that's about sort of like not really taking it really seriously enough, and not really understanding the more systemic natures of the way in which these systems of oppression operate.
Yeah, and sometimes we speak about the microaggressions, and some people don't have an understanding of what those microaggressions and how they play out. But, Prof, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it. We can go on and on with regards to this conversation.
I know,